So, while I was reviewing Titan A.E. a while ago, it was inevitable that I would draw comparisons with Treasure Planet, its twin from another mother, and soon after I launched my video, I received a request to review Treasure Planet, this equally gorgeous bomb but from Disney. So if Titan A.E. was an interesting idea that didn't live to its potential, how did Treasure Planet fared? Is it a forgotten gem? Did it bomb for a reason? Is it overhyped? Let's find out. Oh yeah, since this is also an old movie whose twists are integral to their review and being adapted from a really old novel, this time the spoilers will be open from the get-go and comparisons with Titan A.E. will be inevitable. You've been warned. So, what is it about? Directed by the duo of John Musker and Ron Clements, both considered the fathers of the Disney's 90s Renaissance, Treasure Planet is a 2002 animated movie adapted from Robert Louis Stevenson's most famous novel, Treasure Island. Of course, with the sci-fi twist. This was considered the duo's passion project, and they worked to get this film greenlighted for 16 years. This is the story of Gene Hawkins, voiced by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Yes, that one. A youth whose life turned for the worse after being abandoned by his father, living with his mother Sarah, voiced by Laurie Metcalf, working at her inn, and frequently visited by the family's friend, Dr. Delbert Doppler, voiced by David Hyde Pierce. His life is changed when one day a pirate basically dies at his door after warning him about the cyborg. Seizing the deceased pirate's map, Jim is immediately forced to escape from pirates that torch the inn chasing after his new possession. For it's none other than the map of the fabled Treasure Planet, and to find it, Jim accepts the help of Dr. Doppler, who immediately gathers up an expedition captained by Amelia, voiced by Emma Thompson, and her first mate, Mr. Arrow, voiced by Roscoe Lee Brown. Standing in their way lies the savvy and charismatic pirate Silva, voiced by Brian Murray, whom start bonding with Jim in their long journey, complicating matters since he too is after the treasure. Visuals. Yeah, there is absolutely no doubt about it. The art is the highlight of this movie. This was the twilight of the Disney animated studios before they transitioned to 3D, so expect bright colorful scenarios and models, a nice clash between dark and bright shades, really good lighting effects, and more. There is a prevalence of a brown filter that sometimes switches to red, contrasting with space scenes with blue filter, but it's done well enough that it doesn't become an eyesore. This was a really ambitious movie art-wise, trying to innovate the 3D department. Large models of absolutely bright ships going through space, enormous meteors full of lava, spinning planets ready to blow up. John Silver's model is a blend of 3D and 2D, unheard and unseen by the time, and it's done with absolute precision to the point where only keen eyes will notice some odd effects. Speaking of, the overall designs are quite striking, be it the bizarre blend of Age of Sailing vessels with sci-fi, aliens with all sorts of elaborated designs with attention to the details such as gills, different teeth and eyes, ranging from overly complex to the more anthropomorphic. I quite liked the designs, even though I'm not overly fond of the blocky humanoid faces, which is the signature style of the late Harold Sieperman, also seen in Tarzan. Jim is a teen with dark clothes to show how he is broody, but an oversized coat and pants to show that he is also growing up. Silver, on the other hand, is large and voluminous, yet surprisingly quick, taking most of the screen whenever he is in and guiding the scenes. If Don Bluth went for the bizarre and raw for his aliens, Musker and Clements went for something more cartoonish, with creatures full of eyes or just composed by a head and limbs, or one that speaks through fart noises. Yes, really. It's far more obvious to see who is just a goof and who is a psychopath from designs alone, whereas Titan actually played with designs to show that not everyone who looks like a creep is a bad person. Of course, the budget is far bulkier here. Surprisingly for a movie about space travel after a treasure, there aren't many places to explore. Most of the scenes will be inside the ship, so you have the scenario of the inn, a brief stop at the port, ship below decks, ship, and then the treasure planet itself inside and out. There isn't anything over elaborated about them, but nothing too shabby either. On the other hand, all this attention and focus on the art seems to have been detrimental. Sure, seeing Silver's constant moving cybernetic ear in sync with his animated body is a feast to the eyes, but these elaborated designs were absolutely hell to the budget. Thus, no real reason why they could have been simplified besides being a gigantic animation flex. Acting. As I explained before in my Titan A.E review, if you don't bluff paid attention to lips and snappy movements, Disney paid attention to big, bright eyes and slower, more fluid motions. If a character moves about, more often than not they move their entire on-screen body parts, with a special focus given to their hands. Honestly, while I favor blunts, I like both styles, and I know that each one focuses on different aspects of animation and serves different purposes. Now, action-wise, this is where we see the first problems, and I say the term very, very loosely. The camera and directing are cookie-cutter good. You have the usual and old Disney pans, scenery shots, quick switch between characters, but nothing even remotely as daring or experimental as Titan A.E. Sometimes it feels as if it's going to try to be as dynamic as Titan's spinning camera, following the motions in ample strokes, but it never uses the potential of 2D and 3D. At best, there is the escaped explosion sequence, which is, again, pretty, and the final sequence where the ship is trying to escape the treasure planet is frantic, but after being spoiled by the gorgeous ice fields with tense action, I feel that in Treasure Planet it was a bit too frenetic with that back and forth, not letting the viewer bask into the threat. Again, not bad, just safe. Action scenes are also straightforward, following the same pattern. It's better looking than Titan since it has more dough for the bread, you don't need snappy cameras, but it's safe. Writing. Before I start, just as a refresher, this time I will be discussing spoilers openly, and not only Treasure Planet spoilers, but also Titan A.E.'s. With that out of the way, watching Treasure Planet nearly back to back with Titan A.E. was a freaky and interesting experience. Both movies were so similar in base and structure, and yet so different in execution that was akin to drip two different solutions in a scientifically controlled environment to test results. This is also a movie about a child genius gadgeteer with daddy issues to better themselves by going into a space adventure with animal people. Both protagonists bond with a father figure who are actually evil, said figures manipulated them into their bidding because they have a map that only they can open, only to flip and make a sacrifice at the end. Let's start this analysis with the base. Treasure Planet is an adaptation of Treasure Island, arguably the most influential novel about pirates to ever exist. I've read it, but I do admit that I don't remember a lot about it. As usual, it's far easier to adapt a work than to create one from the get-go, but that doesn't automatically mean success, especially since a lot had to be cut or transformed. The book was an interesting clash between Jim, a kid in an extremely dangerous situation, the loyal crew, Long John Silver and his pirates. And in the original story, Silver was clearly a villainous, murderous bastard who was charismatic enough to manipulate several people and smart enough to escape the whole deal. And there was a lot of death and brutality. A lot. Changing this to an animated PG-13 movie was the equivalent of using cookie recipe to make lasagna. Disney is very experienced in ironing out the gruesome and bloody parts of a story to make it kid-friendly. So the first thing they did was to change the characterization. Here in Treasure Planet, our protagonist Jim is cut from the same cloth as Kale from Titan A.E, except that he seems to be in the inverse direction. While Kale takes a whole movie to start caring about anyone other than himself and Akima, Jim shows right away that while he is the usual edgy teen, he is still kind enough to help a pirate that crashed near his mother's inn. And thank gods he only talks about his father when prompted. His overall attitude seems to be more of a slacker with depression than a real rebel, and bizarrely, while he has an interesting design, he doesn't have a strong on-screen presence due to his more retracted personality. In the books, Jim was a smart kid who was in an extremely dangerous situation and had to navigate by his own wits. Here, it was diluted in ye-olde broody teenager. On the other side of the coin, there is Long John, Silver, at best John Silver. Why did they remove the long? Afraid of dirty jokes? Anyway, this Silver from design and behavior is Jim's opposite, boisterous and larger than life in everything. While he still retains his greed, here he is more of an antagonist rather than a downright villain, and thus all the brutality and murders of his book counterpart are transferred to his underling, Scroop.
Should learn to mind their own business.
Why, you got something to hide, Bright Eyes?
His was an easy change to make, and here it was done more efficiently, with his interactions with Jim softening both of them at the same time. Sure, this means that he isn't as threatening as other villains, but I'd say that this isn't as bad as many said it was. His equivalent of a pirate's pet parrot, Morph, is the usual obligatory Disney cutesy mascot. While annoying, he is actually used as a grease to soften Jim up, so I'm overall neutral. On the co-protagonist side, Captain Amelia is an interesting case of a mix between the action gal full of barbs and the authority figure that we are supposed to hate. If she failed or succeeded in such a role, it depends on the intention of her creator, something that I won't ever guess. She fails as a straightforward example and succeeds as a subversion because whenever she is verbally beating down a person to a pulp, she at least tries to be utmost polite. And whenever she is pointing out someone's flaws, she is 100% right.
To mule and blabber about a treasure map in front of this particular crew demonstrates a level of ineptitude that borders on the imbecilic.
And far more pleasant with whoever shows competence or good ideas made her likable. Being voiced by Emma Thompson also made listening to her the equivalent of having my ears caressed by velvet. So the failure-success dichotomy got hairier. The only thing I didn't like about her was how the movie keeps shoehorning cat noises whenever she does an acrobatic move. Yes, we know she's a cat woman. She already has cat ears, cat face and big eyes full of curiosity and murder. If Silver is the opposite side of Jim's coin, Delbert is Amelia's opposite. A bumbling doctor with verbal tics, at first he set as an emotional support for the Hawkins family and the kickstarters of the chase. But quickly, insanely quickly, I started to despise his presence because as soon as he stepped into a scene, it would be nothing but jokes. And not the good jokes either, just the kind of silly jokes that would make only toddlers on the theater laugh. And since he is the incompetent, naive and inexperienced butt monkey, quite soon he started to just eat valuable screen time, at least until Ben appeared.
Oh, this is fantastic!
This is where things get downright bizarre. Ben is a robot that replaces a stranded sailor from the original novel, and I have no shame or hesitation in saying that I laughed at the guy as soon as he showed up on screen. I love Martin Short, but no voice in this plane of existence would have saved this character from being nothing but an obnoxious, loud, annoying scream black hole. He is constantly screaming, screwing up, being a hassle and even detrimental to Jim.
Fellas, we're over here!
The bizarre part? As if this movie was haunted by an ethereal entity that demanded sacrifice, Delbert was already getting slowly more useful and less annoying as the movie progressed, but after Ben showing up, not only he became downright competent, his jokes became actually funny.
Oh, good!
Yes, I'm sure you will, but before you do, I have one more question.
Is this yours?
I started to genuinely like Delbert, and no, not because someone worse happened to show up. He starts acting as the perfect support for Amelia, restraining her impulses and playing navigator for her. I knew from the get-go the source of the problems of this movie, but this dichotomy made me realize how big this problem was. Basically, the shadow of the mouse here is so thick, it can't let the story itself breathe. It feels as if the narrative is deathly afraid that if there isn't a joke every 3 minutes, or an extra sugary moment to counter the more serious tone of the original novel's plot, this movie is going to crumble itself like a supernova. If Delbert isn't around to make awkward jokes, it's morphed with cutesy hijinks, and when both steps back, Ben appears. All these jokes end up snuffing a lot of screen time that could have been used to flesh out characters or the scenario. For example, I still don't know how or why, in a scenario with space sailing, people still use ropes tied to their hips as lifelines. Could have been explained better, because this weird technological dissonance makes it feel as if the sci-fi was just a coat of paint over the bones of the book without much talk. This virulent aversion to anything serious has another interesting effect on the parts where drama is necessary. They overcompensated later in a slow but vicious tonal swerve that could bend a plane into a boomerang. The start and ending of this flick are so immensely sugary, I had to cut the ending short due to all the screams of the diabetics in my building clutching for their glucagons. Don't worry though, don't worry, they are fine. This is Brazil, we have free healthcare. Last but not least, as per usual of the Disney flick, the mouse denies any chance of real violence. Whenever it's firefight time, Jean cannot hit the broadside of a barn, but we can see over and over goons falling to their deaths in slow motion while screaming for their dear lives. The animators compensate by making on-screen deaths so horrifying and slow I could taste the sarcastic sadism dripping from my screen. It broke, by the way. Seriously. So, after all this, why is this movie so beloved? There's no need to press the skip button, I'm going to answer it right away. Because the storytelling is still efficient. It's the cookie cutter recipe tried and true for the next 50 years of Disney animation for a reason. We start with a good and efficient information dump about the world lore and who Jim is. Then cut to the radical montage with some guitars. Reminded me of that awful Star Trek reboot done 7 years later. Then it's back at being cutesy with kids running around in the inn. I heard that one of the reasons that this movie bombed was due to the misleading advertisement. If I were a teen lured into the theater with promises of space combat and the first scene I saw was an adorable mother-son moment with belly rubs, I'd be bummed out. But by the time this movie was out, the first Dungeons & Dragons movie had taught me a hard lesson about thrillers, so I avoided it. Anyway, then moving on. The intro is simple and straightforward, and the pacing is good. We see who Jim is, we see what he can do with his sailing montage, and we see the problems he is facing. The MacGuffin falls into his lap and the adventure begins. The ship being launched is treated with the fanfare it deserves, with a slow montage of sails being illuminated by the sun, in a good show-don't-tell of how the technology works in this scenario, and now that the ship is out, we start fleshing out his relationship with Silver. Unlike Titan A.E, here it works because of two main reasons. A. We, the audience, know that Silver is evil from the get-go, thus his sudden but inevitable betrayal doesn't feel like a neck snap. And B. The montage is well used to skip the boring repetitive parts and give a reason on why Jean and Silver stick together. Things got too stale? Writing throws a star-going supernova to shake things around and move the plot along without any hiccups. It's efficient. The murderous psycho of the crew, meant to be more villainous than Silver, kills the sacrificial lamb to show that this movie means business, even if it doesn't. And since the father-son bond was established between Jean and Silver, when it's time for him to give his big inspiring speech, we believe him. They get to the island, the mutiny starts, Jean and Silver clash, Jean faces off the murderous psycho in another gruesome kill, and one of the cliches I hate most rears its ugly head. They find the treasure, but something happens and they can't get the treasure. What's up with this bizarre "the hero can't get his reward" trope? Anyway, the protagonists escape, Silver escapes from the protagonist giving a shred of the treasure, and I don't know how or why some meager coins are able to rebuild a whole inn. Jim gets accepted at the Royal Academy with a pompous outfit, Amelia and Delbert get married and have kids, and oh okay, I need to stop. My diabetic neighbors are screaming again. See? Simple, straightforward, efficient in a way only Disney movies can be. Now, in the end, what's the difference between this movie story and, say, Hunchback of Notre Dame, or The Great Mouse Detective? After all these were based on or adapted from literary works. No, I don't like Tarzan, shut up. Anyway, they were allowed to be serious and let their dark side breathe in for a bit. Each one also dared to explore something new within their realms. Treasure Planet played things a bit too safe And instead of letting some parts be darker or develop the plot or character, they replaced it with comedy, so it didn't allow the story to go anywhere interesting. On the other hand, you know what you are getting to when you start this ride, you know it will be at least entertaining, and don't ever underestimate the power of comfort. Soundtrack. On the music department, it's the same song and dance, pun intended. It's good, but doesn't excel at anything. John Rzeznik may deliver a good main character's theme about child abandonment, but he isn't Phil Collins. And since the Disney cookie recipe doesn't allow for more than 3 licensed songs with vocals, we don't have something akin to Power Slave playing while the Cumberland ship escapes the space station. The orchestrated score is also good, but nothing I'd save on my list. Now, on the voice acting, ever since Aladdin uncovered the secrets of the star casting and Pocahontas uncovered the secrets of just because your VAs are famous it doesn't mean they will be good, the Disney Cookie Recipe package allows them to splurge on big names and whip them into shape. The main cast is good regardless of my personal impression with their characters. Brian Murray absolutely steals the show as Silver, playing his role of a barely disguised pirate with gusto, while Joseph Gordon-Levitt was okay, mostly because of how erased Jim was in his whole movie. Emma Thompson was so good at being a solid experienced captain that for a second I thought I had become a furry, but then I remember her in Stranger Than Fiction, so it's just that I love her voice. She can narrate how miserable my life is at any time.
It was remarkable how the simple, modest elements of Harold's life, so often taken for granted, would become the catalyst for an entirely new life.
Final thoughts. Yeah, it's no surprise this film bombed. Even if it hadn't overblown its budget with the absolutely gorgeous visuals, and if they were given proper advertisement, I don't think that it would have fared much better than, say, Brother Bear. It would probably not be a bomb, but it wouldn't be that successful either. It tried at the same time to be a movie to cater to teenagers and kids, using a cookie cutter recipe to what's basically lasagna, and to make things worse, it played it safe with shoehorned kiddie humor. People who enjoy the steampunk and solarpunk are niches. People interested in the book would be turned off by the light characterization and sanitized plot. The result is that it goes nowhere. It's a sci-fi that doesn't use the sci-fi part, which leaves us with Treasure Island with comedy and animals. And Muppets did far better.
You're a professional pirate. You're always in the best of company.
I do understand why this movie has such a cult following though. There is a lot of love in this animation, designs and characters. In the end, if you favor this or Titan A.E. will depend mostly on your personal tastes. Treasure Planet has a better budget, is better organized with better characters but an ambitious cookie cutter style, while Titan A.E. knew its crowd and was ambitious, tried new things with design, story and camera work, but was a mess of alluring but shallow characters in a disjointed pacing. I can only recommend this movie to people who know what they will get into and can appreciate the animation and nice bits of this flick, warts and all.